is Finding Your Customer, the 4 Guidelines to Successful Innovation with Bob Jones. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Well, really, you guys should give your applause to these 3 fellows because they've sat there all day long for probably a month now listening to one speaker after another. And it would be tactless to say they were bored to death, but it's a hard day's work. How about a nice small round of applause for the unsung heroes here? Thank you. So I have this old-fashioned idea that I want your attention for the next 45 minutes, but that I should give you something in return that makes that a fair trade. So what prompted the creation of this talk was I've done a lot of work with startups and innovators, and most of them have failed. And most of us don't like failure. And I developed some opinions as to why the ones who didn't fail, and why most of them did fail. And I have a talk about that topic, but I'll do a better job for you if I have some idea why you're here and what you want to get out of this. So if you had a big lunch and your feet hurt and you were just hoping you could sit someplace with a speaker who'd talk in a soothing monotone so that you got a nice nap, I'm probably going to disappoint you. But how many of you are engaged in innovation of some form right now? Yeah? Okay, on the R&D side, on the management R&D? Okay, and don't tell us anything confidential, but is it a manufacturing technology? Is it a consumer product when it grows up? Is it a service business? What is it? Consumer product. Okay, you're bold. How about you?
Consumer product.
Death wish. Okay. So how many of you here actually have a background that's more in marketing? 1 or 2, not too many. And this will strike you as a really odd question. I'll explain it later. Do we have any musicians in the room? Well, we're amateur. Yeah? Yes? What's your instrument? Keyboards. What kind of music? Symphonic rock. I'm impressed. Well, I'll give you an explanation for why I asked the question in a couple of minutes, but I think you may find yourself well suited to what it takes for innovation. So, okay, I asked a couple of you quick questions about what are you working on. I'm going to give you 2 case studies today. Case studies are necessarily specific, so if I got involved in launching something that's a little off the wall, maybe we can extract some lessons. It's not supposed to be altogether applicable. We'll try to extract some lessons. What are some good things to do and some bad things to avoid? And I will leave some time at the end for your questions, but if you just are feeling overwhelmed with the need to ask the question, don't fight the feeling, just ask. All right? And Michael's wandering around with a microphone in case you're soft-spoken. So 3 decisions I hope to help you make. How can we focus our new product development activities to gain an early win? If you're working for a big consumer packaged goods company, that's probably a foreign concept because a lot of them have audacious big picture goals, 150 million revenues in year 1 domestically, 500 million internationally by the end of year 2, et cetera. And the early win concept is kind of novel. But in the entrepreneurial community where I live, getting out there and getting some traction early is important. Second, how can we develop a launch strategy that leads smoothly into a growth strategy? In other words, where you start isn't necessarily where you end up, but it helps if where you start works and makes a little money. And then finally, how can we reduce the risk of innovation without completely killing the whole desire to have innovation? Because I do work from time to time with some large organizations who say, oh yes, we want to be bold and innovative, but no risk. and a tactful response is, how do you spell fat chance? So a couple words about me. I'm currently running my 4th startup. We have a 2.5-ounce drink that helps you sleep at night based just on food ingredients. It's called Food for Sleep. Yes, it's on Amazon. I did some work for the strategy consulting firm. I spent a couple years turning around a small publicly traded soy foods company It was a mess, had nothing to do with innovation. It was just block and tackle. Started 3 other companies in the food as medicine space. Had a couple of normal jobs. Went to a couple of schools. And I'm pretty active evenings and weekends as a blues guitarist. And the reason I asked the question about musicians in the room is I think to be good at what I do musically requires an odd combination of creativity and discipline. And I think that fits pretty well, and it's not a bad model for innovation. It also has had a profound impact on how I look at creative collaborations and managing teams. I do not play the saxophone, but I know when I'm working with a bad sax player. Okay, some years ago, when we came out of the previous recession, the Wall Street Journal took a look at who survived, because a lot of companies went bust and some did not. And they said, well, what were the strategies for the companies that did not fail? And there were 2. One is they were cost leader. And if you're looking for advice on how to do that, you're in the wrong place. The other was they became innovators. They focused on building brands. And it's tempting sometimes to think, well, this requires a fancy hydrocolloid or artificial intelligence or algorithms, and it doesn't. What it requires is that you understand where your end user is dissatisfied. And that could mean there's 50 kids in town that want a bicycle and there's no bicycle shop. But where the end user is dissatisfied is where you have opportunity. And as you assess what you want, there are questions you should ask. What's broke that I fix? We might have yet another shampoo, but God help us if that's our consumer packaged good intent, because the landscape is so cluttered, it's hard to find anything that isn't already fixed. And who cares? And that's not a rhetorical question. It's specifically, who out there is trying to fix the problem? If it's a guitar for people who are left-handed, that's who you go look for. Will they spend any money to solve the problem? One of the things I did was launch this sleep product chasing working moms. Overworked, overscheduled, overcaffeinated, fussy shoppers like natural foods. They didn't buy it because working moms as a group will not spend any money on themselves. They will spend a fortune on their children and $2 on their husband. Nothing on themselves. So this is a realistic question. Will they spend any money to solve the problem? How do I find them? How are they solving the problem now, and why will they think the solution is better? It's real easy to fall in love with your invention and give all kinds of reasons why you think it's better. Doesn't matter. And who's going to pay me? So if your goal is to have 10 million in revenue, we have 1 million customers who give you $10 a piece. We have 10 customers who give you $1 million a piece. By the way, I'd love to join you in that business. Where on the spectrum in between, and who are they specifically? So there's 2 descriptors that I think you want. You'd like to have something that's unique and important and hits that sweet spot, yes? And I think we'll agree that air is probably important, probably not unique. Now, I gave this talk in Cambridge a week or 2 ago, and everybody in the room burst into tears when I put the next one up, which is, most of us agree that MIT decals are unique, but probably not important. So can you build a business selling air? Yes? No? Yes. How? Selling air where air is polluted. Good. One pretty good example. Another? Sorry? Where it's in short supply, such as high altitude. Let me offer you the reverse of that. Any of you guys ever gone scuba diving? I did my checkout dive off Catalina Island off the coast of California. Ended up down about 100 feet, swimming through the kelp beds, which is kind of like an underground redwood forest. Then I looked at the little watch thing and thought, ooh, I'd pay a lot of money for some air right now. Right? So, air for scuba divers, not a bad business. And if I told you that for 8 or 9 cents worth of materials, you could sell something for $10. You'd say, ooh, pretty good business. And you'll find that in the school store. So I'm being a little bit facetious, but the point is that positioning is imperative. Products that are for everyone aren't for anyone. Figure out who wants it and build it for them and take their money. Okay, so a case study. Some years ago, I was working in California for a hospital supply company, and I was running the clinical nutrition business. And this was a sleepy company, got bought by a guy, took it private, gave everybody some stock, said, I want to grow the revenues a lot in the next 3 years and take this thing public. So here's some stock for you, and here's some stock for you, and here's some stock for you, and let's not argue. Let's make this thing worth a lot of money, and then you can buy a boat, you can buy a second home. Everybody like that? So it was quite motivational. And our division was very profitable. But I went out into the marketplace and figured out that because managed care was coming, it was going to go away. I thought, oops. And because I had to find something to replace it, I came up with an idea that nobody had done before. Those, by the way, can be famous last words. Nobody's done this before. All right, put that on your tombstone. But because I had worked at Baxter, I knew something about the renal dialysis market. And at the time, there were 400,000 patients that had kidney failure and were undergoing dialysis. And it was easy to locate them because 3 times a week they were in a dialysis center and they were in a pamphlet, the locations, a pamphlet published by the government. So I knew where you'd be on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and where you'd be on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I could find you. Right. Now, if your kidneys fail, you're not supposed to do what most of you do all day long, which is drink some fluids, because you can't excrete them. So you become fluid restricted. But because of other things your kidneys do, you also become malnourished, and all the nutrition supplements were fluids. Think Ensure. So I thought, well, what's wrong with this picture? And, you know, I have kind of a small mind, but I thought, why don't we make something that's high in what it ought to be high in and doesn't have any of what you shouldn't have and doesn't have any fluid? Let's make a nutrition bar. One of those duh moments, right? We didn't have to do clinical trials. We were in the food business, but we were an ethical outfit. We connected with, those of you from California know Kaiser Permanente, right? We ran a clinical trial, got the results published in a peer-reviewed journal, and the bottom line was the product worked. So we said, excellent, improve their health. We know how to do this. These patients see a doctor. They see a renal dietitian. We know who the opinion leaders are. Let's call them up. And we said, what do you think of this? And most of the time the answer was, damn, I wish I thought of it myself. So how many of your patients would you recommend it for? And I said, all of them. Really? How many days a week would you recommend that they take this? 7. How do you feel about $3 a bar? Sounds great. We did the math and said, geez, this is a significant opportunity. We did the revenue forecast. We brought in the branding types. We did the beauty shots of the product. We trained the sales force, put together the commission plans. It went out into the market and launched it. It was a complete disaster. So every month I had to stand in front of the senior management group of the company, and they'd say, well, Bob, you were supposed to bring in $40,000 this month. How'd you do? And I'd have to say, 3. Excuse me? 3. What did I do wrong? Why did this flop? Yes, ma'am. You've seen this presentation before. Did you guys hear what she said? Hold on, say it again.
You didn't talk to the customer.
Well, she's absolutely right. We talked to the doctors. We talk to the dietitians. We talk to the nurses. But they don't buy it, and they don't eat it. And when we did talk to the patients, they didn't want it, and they couldn't afford it. Now, you're so smart. We had something that measurably improved their health and extended their life. Why didn't they want it? I'm sorry? Well, we thought it tasted pretty good. But when your kidneys fail, your palate shifts, and protein tastes like spoiled meat. Reference your remark, we didn't test it with the customers. That was one reason. But it wasn't the most critical reason. Who gets kidney failure? Money? No. But that was part of it. Who gets kidney failure? 44% of them get there from a lifetime of neglecting their diabetes. 33% get there from a lifetime of mismanaging their high blood pressure. So 3/4 of my target market spent their whole life neglecting themselves. They weren't going to change now. Plus, they're connected up to a machine for 3 or 4 hours at a time, 3 times a week, and a well-intended social worker would come along and say, well, Rodrigo, we're going to put you on public aid because obviously you can't hold a job, and now you don't have any money. And if you do, you'll spend it on beer and cigarettes, not on my product. There was one other problem. We'd been selling to hospitals. We had never dealt with retail outfit. And if you ever want to see somebody have a really good laugh at your expense, walk up to a retail pharmacist and say, I have a product you've never heard of from a company you've never done business with for a group of customers who don't want it and don't have any money, but I'd love to have you stock it. That's a tough sell. So we said, well, gosh, if 75% of them aren't going to buy it, 25% of them still might. We ought to be able to find them, and we did. And if they don't have any money, maybe we can get Medicaid to reimburse. Now, you know that Medicaid is a state-run program. What do you think are the chances that Illinois and Indiana have the same requirements? So 40 separate states was almost as much fun as 40 consecutive root canals. We said, this is just a terrible way to make a living. And we sold the business to a small outfit that specialized in these patients. And we were the crown jewel for them because we had an honest-to-God clinical trial. We made about $1 more than the whole thing cost us, but we got out. So, there's some evidence that entrepreneurship is actually a form of mental illness. I did 2 more of these, did a little bit better, got to know the snotty doctors at Harvard Med School, and forgive me if that's redundant. And I moved to Boston. We launched a company together. We looked at all the research projects they were doing. We settled on diabetes as an area where we thought we could make a difference. So a little bit of medical stuff. At the time, there were 10 million people who were diagnosed with diabetes. The thought was it's a chronic disease, it's manageable, but you can't cure it. And the goal is to keep your blood sugar fluctuations within a kind of narrow bandwidth. Don't go too high, don't go too low. And most of the attention was being paid on what happens if your blood sugar stays too high for too long, which is that it causes blindness, kidney failure, and amputation of your extremities. So catastrophic for the patient. Consequently, there were about 40% of these patients at the time that used insulin to manage their blood sugar. The government launched a massive clinical trial and tested something called tight control, which is basically 3 small meals a day, 3 small snacks a day, a lot of regular small injections of insulin, and you restrict that bandwidth. And it was very, very effective. Dramatically reduced the incidence of high blood glucose. But unfortunately, the incidence of low blood glucose tripled. And that's a very different thing because it's got to be treated right away because you get woozy, you faint, it can lead to coma. And everybody who took insulin at the time was at risk of low blood sugar. So the big issue was, what do you do at night? Because nobody was going to wake themselves up 2 or 3 times a night, eat a snack and inject themselves. So the reaction typically was, well, I'll have a big snack and a big bolus of insulin, and I'll hope that the two will titrate across the night. Doesn't work, because the food all turns into glucose at the same time. The spike is higher, but the duration is no longer. The translation of this is that at 2 o'clock in the morning, the insulin is still working and the food is not. That's the danger zone. Constant anxiety. But we did a few focus groups. You guys have done focus groups? Yes? You're familiar with the one-way glass thing? Well, after about 4 of them, I had a temper tantrum and went around and sat in the room and threw the moderator out and looked at all of the people in the room and said, look, we've spent 30 or 40 minutes talking about this. Enough with the academics. Tell me what your greatest fear is. And they sort of, I'm afraid I'll die in my sleep. I don't sleep in my bed. I sleep in that recliner in the living room because I'm afraid if I get too comfortable, I won't wake up. So that's gripping. So we developed a nutrition bar, had 3 ingredients, turned into glucose progressively through the evening. And being fundamentally a marketer at heart, I, of course, dubbed it as timed release glucose. We picked a non-medical name and non-medical packaging. Why did we do that? Genius? No ideas? I'm sorry? To let the customer know what they're getting. Well, that was certainly a requirement, but why would we use a non-medical name and non-medical packaging? You guys really are R&D types, aren't you? I'm teasing. I was actually in Washington arm wrestling with the FDA. I wanted to be able to say for people with diabetes on the package, until a couple of the customers said, Bob, if you do that, I won't buy the product. Because I don't think of myself as a diabetic. I'm a lawyer. I'm a scientist. I'm a banker. It's nobody's business whether or not I have a medical condition. You get headaches, you get migraines, you do whatever it is you do. I have diabetes, but I'm managing it. I thought, ooh, well, I was working very hard to do exactly the thing that would have killed the business. So what should it look like? I said, well, make it look like something that, I don't know, an elite athlete would consume. And in point of fact, we did sell some to marathon runners who love the idea of timed release glucose. So we engaged a whole bunch of different constituencies in this product formulation. We thought at the time that our market was kids that had type 1 diabetes. So we went to all these meetings at elementary schools and sat in those little chairs that were about this high and listened to what it was like for moms and dads who had an 8-year-old that had diabetes. We learned a lot about it. We picked an ad agency that was familiar with this arena. We said, what do most of the ads look like? This was in the time when people still read magazines. And they said, well, usually on the back cover, it's a full-page blow-up of a hypodermic needle. The rationale was, his needle's sharper than mine. It won't hurt as much by his. I thought, well, we can do better than that. So we did an ad with flying pigs with some copy about to sleep, perchance to dream, etc. And one bite is, and the rest is easy. And we ran a little violator across the corner that said, call our number for a free sample. And remember, we were startup. We had no money and no ad budget. But we ran those ads and we started getting 100 calls a day. We had to get more phones. At 200 calls a day, we said, oh my God. And we went out. I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the time. And we said, well, there's more geniuses per square foot here in Kendall Square than there are in most places. And pardon me, sir, but you appear to have a pulse. Would you like a job? So, at 300 calls a day, we said, God, we need a database. At 500 calls a day, we rented tables and chairs and hired people and said, I think we're onto something. At the end of all that, we ended up in every major pharmacy chain in the country, and nobody charged us slotting fees. Do you guys know what slotting fees are? Yeah, it's like extortion. But we managed to do this without any slotting fees, which had not been done before. And if you look really hard, you'll discover that there's a small Harvard Business School case study on our company because we did this. So understanding the customer helped us build a better product and build a better company. But I want to talk a little bit about how we reached our customers, because I promised in the title to give you 4 guidelines. So bear with me, we'll get there. All right. We said, well, who do they trust? Where do they go for advice? And where do they spend any money? And we figured out after a while that a fair number of people who have diabetes actually are not committed to taking care of themselves. So we said, how do we find the ones who are not only willing to take care of themselves, but spending money to take care of themselves? Because that's our target customer. And the answer turned out at the time to be that they were seeing a credentialed professional called a certified diabetes educator. They have an association, surprisingly enough, it's called the American Association of Diabetes Educators. They have a little tab, it says locate an educator. So you type in the zip code 02142 and out pops a long list of all the CDEs in Cambridge, Massachusetts, along with their contact data. We said, well, that was easy. But we said, what do they care about? This is kind of a new definition of the customer. What do these folks care about? So we solved that problem. I'll tell you how in a second. But the net was we ended up with about 3,000 highly credentialed sales reps working for us for free. Again, we had no money. So we started calling them up. And we said, what's your greatest professional frustration? We knew we wanted to influence them. We knew they thought of themselves as healers, and that if we were to offer them money, they would be offended. So we asked them, what's your greatest professional frustration? What was the answer? I know, I should speak in a soothing monotone so you can continue your nap, right? What was the answer?
New content.
Oh, they were not doing what they were being told to do. The one-word answer for that is compliance. I tell them what to do, and they don't do it. So we said, well, what if we told you that a bunch of snotty Harvard doctors invented a candy bar for these diabetes patients, and they'll love it, they'll take it regularly, and they'll thank you for recommending it? How would you feel about that? And they'd say, oh my God, I'd have your babies. Well, I don't want no more babies. But would you talk about it a little bit? And they said, absolutely. And so the way we compensated them was we gave them something they wanted, which was not money. So we were, in fact, influencing the influencers, but in a completely ethical fashion. With me? Yeah. Okay. We said, you guys have any friends who are retailers? They said, oh yeah, we send our patients to the retailers all the time. We said, well, then maybe the flow chart at the moment is we'll talk to the educators, they'll talk to the patients will buy from us. But let's be honest, we're never going to get to heaven doing that. What we need to do is get to the retailers. So maybe the educators could call the retailers, maybe the patients could call the retailers, maybe then we could call the retailers, close the deal, and make more money. But this, of course, is a new definition of who is our customer. So, what do retailers care about? Well, have you ever watched a pharmacist answer the phone? Looks like this. Pharmacy. You have about 12 seconds to get their attention. So we'd say, Rodrigo, we have a group of diabetes patients who like our product and they want to buy it from you and you don't have it. What can we do about this? Wait, what? Who is this? And Rodrigo would say, well, all right, it makes sense, but you know, I can't buy, we're a Walgreens. I can't buy this product without corporate approval. We'd say, yeah, we know that. But we suspect there's a number below which you can buy, and we're guessing it's $100. Well, yeah, that's right. What'd that do? Think I got it. Thank you. They said, yep, it's $100. We said, well, you'll be pleased to know that our starter kit costs $99.95. And if it doesn't sell, you don't have to send it back to us. Just throw it in the trash. We'll take your word for it, and we'll refund your money. No risk. So they did. We would call our patients up and say, Rodrigo's Pharmacy is now stocking the product. Wouldn't you like to go in and get some the next time you pick up your insulin? And about a week later, we'd call Rodrigo and we'd say, Rodrigo, we just want to confirm that you got our stuff. Because we know we shipped it, but we don't know that you got it. And he'd say, well, wait a minute, let me go look. Oh my God, it's already sold. We'd say, well, imagine that. Wouldn't you like to do like a regular reorder? And pretty soon it was corporate approval and all of that stuff. Nobody mentioned slotting fees. The next step, of course, was to get into wholesalers. And that's a longer story that I'm not going to give you today because we don't have enough time. But the business grew handsomely. We had an extraordinarily high reorder rate. We got mentioned in a lot of the appropriate publications, and we ended up selling the business to $1 billion pharmacy. Everybody was happy. Our patients were happy. Our investors were happy. Come to think of it, we were happy. So I had a complete flop. I had one that did pretty well, a couple in the middle that were sort of in between. I've learned some lessons. I want your help. Tell me what I should have learned from these experiences. What lessons can we extract from this? Talk to your customer. That was the first. Let me go before that. How about figure out who your customer is and then talk to them?
Just raise your hand so I can get the microphone over to you.
Ooh.
So we can all hear you.
What other lessons? Okay, you want me to make this easy for you, don't you? Yes, sir. All right. Where does your customer get the information? And let me elaborate on that. How about where do they get the information from people they trust? Right? Because in this field, there are lots of people who are putting out products that they absolutely and sincerely will promise will bring dead people back to life. So they don't always trust the sources of information. So here's a couple. Know what they're really buying. All right. In my case, what I was selling with Nightbite was security. You will not die in your sleep. All right. Products that are for everyone. And this flies in the face of an awful lot of the big CPG companies who want to be in every pantry in America, if not the world. I think products that are for everyone aren't for anyone. And if you're thinking of innovation, and some of you are in it right now, I think you need to face the fact that nobody needs what you're selling. They might need the benefits. I actually don't need these glasses. What I need is to see better. So I hired glasses. Some of you hired contact lenses, and I bet some of you know the surgeon that does the laser stuff, right? All of us have the same unmet need. We want to see better. So sell the benefits first, then provide the scientific proof. This is very difficult for the R&D people that I've worked closely with. They think, oh my God, we have all these awesome hydrocolloids. The benefit should be self-evident, and customers will flock to us. And if they don't, it's because the customers are dumb. I know you've never heard that, but I have. Let's talk for a moment about market segmentation. Who knows what that is? Well, what is it?
Your various customers.
Sorry?
Your various customers.
All right. And how do we usually divide customers into segments? Age. Okay. What else?
Gender.
Gender. Sorry? Income. Okay. I'm going to argue that if you're in an early stage venture, all of those are wrong. I think you should segment them by who wants it. And by the way, if you only remember one thing from this talk today, I think this slide is the one I would have you remember. I think it's really important to focus on who's feeling the pain right now. So we'll take an extreme example. Let's say that yesterday you survived your first heart attack. God forbid. If you didn't survive, you're not my customer. But let's say I have something that prevents a second heart attack. You're right in that top box. Just below that, your brothers and sisters might say, oh, we have the same family profile. We're a little worried. Below that will be people who say, we're of a certain age and we kind of don't exercise as much as we ought to and might have hit Dunkin' Donuts a few times too many. But many people take a look at this and say, this is where all the people are. It's crazy to do anything other than go after that market. And my response, forget it, because that is a graveyard for now. My counsel to you is start there. Couple reasons. First, you want that early win. It's nice to get some revenues. Second, if you can't succeed there, you don't really have a business. It's fashionable in the innovation community to say, fail quickly. What does that mean? Does that mean let's go out and deliberately fall on our face? No, it means figure out, do you have a proposition that makes sense, and do it as quickly as you can for short money if you can do it. So if you can find those people and say, I'm willing to give it to you for free. Do you want it? And they say, no. Then it's time for your next idea, right? Okay, changing buying habits takes a lot of motivation. And powerful motivators are things like pain, fear, greed, vanity. I don't mean to sound like Gordon Gekko, wasn't that who it was, right? But I was selling against fear with Nightbite. Virtue, however, is a tough sell. And with Regain, all we would say every 6 months is your numbers have improved, congratulations. Right? Who cares? How many of you have to deal from time to time with people who are marketers by background? All right, they seem like they've come from another planet, right? I'm going to give you the equivalent of an entire MBA program in marketing in 2 steps. And mind you, you can get really sophisticated. You can talk about multivariate factor analysis. You can put together third-order polynomials to predict consumer buying behavior, yada, yada, yada. If you do all of that and you omit these next 2 steps, you have missed the boat. Find out what your customers want and give it to them. It's like a firm grasp of the obvious, right? I have been in untold meetings where these 2 points got overlooked. Okay, I believe that you should launch in a market where you can win, and that calls for focus. And forgive me for doing this to you, but I used to have a boss that would walk around the office saying this. He would say, there is no hocus pocus that will take the place of focus. And all of us would say, oh, make him stop. Right? But it's true. So it's not really sales. It's forensics. It's detective work. Who wants what you've got, and how do you find them? And if you've done it right, it ought to be easy to sell it. So, the 4 guidelines as we draw this to a close. Identify your customer. So what are you really selling? Are you selling security? Are you selling vanity? Are you selling good looks? I have something that will make you 10 years younger, 3 inches taller, 20 pounds lighter, and your children will be geniuses. Okay, that's a virtue. Find them. So, Are they gluten sensitive? Are all of them members of the Celiac Society? Is it somebody in the family that has Alzheimer's? I mean, what is the key bond that unites them, that makes it efficient for you to find them? MBAs and venture capitalists like to talk about customer acquisition costs. But if you're making $3 on your product and spending $5 to find your customer, it's probably not a good business proposition. So if you can find them efficiently, it improves the likelihood that your venture will succeed. There's a term out there, influencer marketing. I'm a little wary of it, but I think trusted advisors make sense. If you're dealing with athletes and they trust their strength and conditioning coach, that's a trusted advisor. If you can figure out who that is, and you can figure out a way where your innovation helps the trusted advisor, you're way ahead of the game. So identify your customers, find them, identify their trusted advisors, and influence the influencers. Okay, quick commercial announcement. Sorry, this is shameless. If any of you guys want to dive more deeply into this, I run some 2-day workshops that go further into this. End of commercial announcement. You can find me at findingyourcustomer.com. Your turn. We have a few minutes. Questions?
Just raise your hand up. I can come by with a microphone.
So I really did put you to sleep, huh?
All right. Well, Bob, you hang out for a little bit afterwards?
Yep, and I have a concluding slide and I have a request. I put feedback forms on most of these seats because, again, I have this naive notion I should try to do a good job. So I would be grateful for your feedback. You can either leave it on the chair or put it on the stage. I'll collect them when we're done. You guys know the 2 words that audiences most like to hear from a speaker?
Good night.
In conclusion. So in conclusion, the only non-negotiable requirement for having a successful business is customers. You don't have to be smart, you don't have to be rich, and you don't have to be good looking. If you have customers, people will think you're smart. If you have enough customers, you will become rich. And if you get rich enough, people will think you're good looking. Sorry, that was a joke. All right, and 4 guidelines that'll help your innovation succeed. Figure out who wants what you've got, figure out how to find them efficiently, identify their influencers, find a way to ethically influence the influencers, and then take their orders. Thank you very much.
Great job, Bob. Thank you for spending
Thank
that
you.
time with us.